In this lesson, we will explore how to work with files in Node.js both synchronously and asynchronously using the file system and path modules. These modules are essential for working with files on the server. So let's dive in. First of all, what we need to do, we need to prepare our Visual Studio Code to be able to create everything that we would like to. First of all, we will initialize our terminal and our Node application. So node, npm init-y. Why we just given? Because when we create without that I, as I mentioned before, as you see before, you have to do step by step the answer for that questions. Right now, when you just create -y, everything will work as it should. Of course, that will work without that init-y, but remember, we will just go step by step, and I would like you to remember some good practices that you will later on learn more. So npm init-y and press enter, wait a second, and right there you should create new file and index.js, and that's the index where we will provide and create our functions to perform file operations, such as reading, writing files. The path module will provide utilities for working with file and directory paths. Both modules are core modules, so I mean file system and path of Node.js, and you should and you have to require them in the code like this. So we create right that require, and right there we need fs like a file system. The next thing, path, and we will require it from the path. Right now we just imported some of the modules, and in that case Node.js can read files, so that fs synchronously, so step by step, or asynchronously, will demonstrate both methods. So using that fs file module, we will just go through the synchronous and asynchronous, so you will be able to see how this is working right now. And right now, first of all, what we need to do, we need to create our file path. So file path, and it equals path that join, and over here we need to create path dash dash dir name. We create directory name where we are. Then we should create some kind of folder name, and I'll just stick with it because we need to see everything clearly what we are doing. Folder name, and the last one will be the type of the path that we will just create. So file.txt. The next thing that we'll need to do is to try to read our file data and to catch the errors if something will go wrong. And to do that, we need to get a try catch block. Try catch block will try to do something what we trying to create inside that try statement. If some error will occur, it will go to the catch error and it will console, for example, our error. So const data equals fs read file sync, and right there we need file path, file path, and as second argument we need the encoding. So in our case it will be UTF-8, but without dash. Okay. The next thing, if everything will be okay, we'll create file content, and it will be the data. And to create that folder, we'll need to create the folder name as we create over here, and then file.txt. In that file.txt, we'll write whatever. Okay, save it. Going back to our index.js, and right now if something go wrong, then console.error, and we will just console.error reading file, and we'll pass some error that will occur. Of course, we can just create everything like it is, but whatever will happen if the file is working or not. So to check if everything's working correctly as we would like to have working, we need to launch our Node.js application. And to do that, we simply create node index.js, and right there, as you can see, our file content is whatever. So that's how we're using file sync function, which takes that arguments to file path and the file encoding. Remember, in most cases, it will be UTF-8. And that function, as you can see, return the data that's inside the file that we just created. If some error will occur, then we will just get console.error, but we will talk about errors later on. And remember, that's the very good sign to create that kinds of things whenever you create synchronously, but I don't recommend it really, because the better path is asynchronously to create that. And to make it happen without any disturbing, you should stick with another way that we'll just do. That's the way you should avoid from time to time when you just got some kind of file that we just created over here. So only one whatever is over here. That's okay. If that's a bigger file, you should avoid it. So, okay, now we will get to write something also using that synchronously type. So that's, I will code it, comment it, and read from the file. Of course, we can also write to the file, and right there, I will just make it happen as it should. And of course, we've got some kind of file, and we'll just create some kind of content that will create there. So for example, this is the content that will appear inside our file. Okay, we save it. And right now, of course, we create try catch block. And how we do that? It's fairly simple as we did before, but we don't need to assign that. So fs.write file sync, and right there, we'll need to create the file. So it will be our file path. And the next thing that we'll need to provide, as you can see, data string, some kind of data, in our case is content, and as the other and the last is the utility, so the encoding. So UTF and 8 at the end. And console.log file written correctly. If the error occurs, we should create some kind of error. I will just copy and paste it over here. Error, writing files, and of course we need to relaunch it. Remember to save it first. Node index.js, wait a second, and files written correctly. We can go there. As we can see, this is the content that will appear inside our file. That's the thing that we write over here. So Of course, we can create, so read something from the file, write something from the file. It's up to you what you will do, but it's the sync way. So in our case, when we just provide some kind of simple string, it doesn't matter. But whenever you provide a lot of data, you should take another path. So we will switch to that path, I mean asynchronously path. So in this example, I will just comment it out. Wait a second. Comment. In this example, I will just show you the asynchronously using the fs read file method. And I will show you that it's quite simpler even to write, because we don't need to create such a try-catch block. In our case, we only need fs.read file, and right there, we need file path, of course, UTF-8. The next thing, we'll need to provide error and data. And with that in mind, we open parentheses, if statement, we check if there is an error. If it is, we console that error. For example, error in reading, we don't need anything more, and we will just return. But if everything's go okay, we just console that log, file content, we'll just make it like that, and we'll pass their data. We save it. Of course, node index.js, we run it, and as you can see, this is the content that will appear inside our file that we just create over here. And with that, we created our first asynchronously way of creating file using Node.js and fs module. Okay, when we just create that file, read that file, we need to something to write that file. Is it harder or not? To do that, we'll just comment it out, of course. And I will just make some comment, reading from the file asynchronously. And right now, we'll just make writing to the file asynchronously. And with that, the only thing that we need to do is fs.write file. And right there, we need some kind of things. So first of all, we need the file path that we just provided. I have to remember that that's the file path that we created, is our folder name and file.txt. And the content that we'll provide, of course, we can just pass that content. We learn Node.js. The next thing is our UTF-8. And the last thing, we need only error to check if there's an error. Of course, if it's error, we need to console that error, and we'll just pass only error, and of course return. And if everything's go okay, we need to console that log, file written successfully. Save it, and we run our application. So node index.js, file written successfully. As you can see, we learn JS is created inside our file.txt. And for more operations on file, I recommend you to just briefly go to the link that I will provide. And inside there, you've got the documentation about fs that we just created. Of course, you will not understand everything. You'll probably understand less than 1%, but believe me, getting well with documentation is very, very crucial and important path whenever you are starting your journey using some kind of language, and especially programming language. Right there, for example, you've got your read file, but created in another way, because you can create files in such a ways. And you can, of course, try to copy that code and run it. If everything will be okay, you can check how it's working, just reading that documentation step by step. If you don't understand anything, don't worry, but you have to remember that here, for example, as path, you can pass string and so on, so forth. So don't worry, visit that and look what Node.js and that file system only can provide you to do and achieve.